Why is there something rather than nothing? This is a question that has plagued philosophers for centuries. The first person to pose this question explicitly seems to be our friend who we've met before on this channel, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Of course, this is often used to argue for the existence of God, but it's pretty clear that this doesn't answer the question because God still falls under the heading of something. I can't help thinking that there's something semantically wrong with this question, and part of this lies in our understanding of nothing. What is nothing? The semantic problem is already there in that question, but I'll come back to it a little bit later. Let's pretend for the moment that we can actually answer this question. Most people, when they contemplate nothing, might think of this universe of ours, but completely devoid of matter and energy. A big, empty, absolutely total absence of all things. Let's leave aside for the moment the fact that empty space is actually filled with energy, with fields, with potential matter, and so on. Empty space is actually far from empty. But let's pretend that we can get rid of these two, even though they're probably what actually constitute this nothing. Let's suppose that this completely empty space might exist. But space itself can be warped by the presence of matter and energy. There's no matter there now in our imagination, no matter, no energy, we suppose, but if there were, it would bend this space. So there is something there that potentially at least can be warped. Empty space, even completely empty space, is not in fact nothing. It's something. At the very least, it's a potential container for other somethings. And that, to my mind at least, is not nothing. So nothing, in fact, is an absence of everything, including space and time. For a very good reason, we can't really conceive of this. Nothing is not a thing. It's not a being of any kind. It's not even the absence of beings, which would itself be a thing. Obviously, this can't be put into language. It can't even be thought. It can't be imagined. So, first of all, when we ask, why is there something rather than nothing, we have no way to actually compare those possibilities. We only know something, even were that something to be totally empty space, assuming that we could somehow project ourselves into that situation. Nothing is inconceivable, quite literally. That in itself should be enough to warn us that this question is not, in fact, answerable. I would argue, though, that it's not, in fact, askable. So here we need to consider one of the other terms in this question, is. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there something? At least this makes semantic sense. The verb to be can be used here because something does indeed have being. But why isn't there nothing is gibberish. Is cannot be applied to nothing. By definition, if it's truly nothing, that is. It can only be applied to nothing if it isn't truly nothing and is actually something. If it has being, in other words. But nothing is something is an oxymoron. So the question is in fact meaningless. It literally has no meaning. It's semantic nonsense. It's a verbal trick. That may be somewhat annoying to those people who actually want to answer this question, but it's not actually a real question with actual real meaning. It's a string of letters and syllables and no more than that. It sounds as though it should have meaning because it sounds like other questions we might ask, such as why is the sky blue rather than yellow, or why are there elephants here rather than polar bears? But it's not the same because nothing is no kind of being, and so the verb to be cannot be applied meaningfully to it. The confusion is caused by the fact that we cannot in any way at all conceive of actual nothing. Our brain defaults to the idea that nothing must actually be something, which of course completely undermines the intention of the question, which becomes, why is there something rather than something? Or why is there this thing rather than that thing? Now that's a less fundamental question, but one that at least actually means something. Why is there this rather than something else? Now, this question leads into all kinds of other issues, such as the so-called anthropic principle and the so-called multiverse, which I won't go into here. But the question, why is there something rather than nothing, is bunkum.